everyone, my name is Sarah, and today we are doing an update on my Project 100 uses. So in my last Project 100 uses update, the first update, I said that I would only come back and talk to you guys if I had significant progress. And I have significant progress. One of my first goals is met. So actually lots happened with my makeup collection quite recently, actually. So the first update is that my friends sent me some makeup. They sent me some makeup brushes and some glitter glue. My friends are so sweet. They got me so much stuff and it's really incredible. So what that means for this project is, despite the fact that I said last month that I wouldn't be using any of the glitters in this palette, I can now use them because I have a glitter glue and they don't fall into my eyes anymore, so I feel much more comfortable using the glitters. The other thing that changes is that once I get 200 uses on both of these palettes, I'm going to buy myself 2 lipsticks. So it's all about what colors I should get. I know I'm going to get black and probably like a dark purple, kind of like a vampy, something to match this eye look. This is my eye look today, by the way. Also, in our format this month and from now on, I'm going to be putting looks that I've done up somewhere, probably over the bookshelf. But I am going to be putting those up for you guys. I still haven't figured out where I want to put them, but I think my makeup skills have gotten good enough that I do want to start sharing what I've been doing with the makeup. Before, my makeup looks were kind of bad. My makeup looks aren't great now, but they are considerably better than at where I was last month, even last year, especially with the brushes that I have now. So my first goal of the project was to use every shade, every matte in this palette at least once, and I did it. I did it really quickly, actually. I'm doing the thing where I talk too fast again. So, like I've said, I finally used every color in this palette at least once, other than the shimmers. So every one of these I've used. And then my secondary goal, you can probably see yourselves. I don't know if you can or not, but this is what you're standing on if you can see that. My filming setup is still not great. It looks a lot better now, and the camera isn't going to shake because I'm no longer on my bed. Last time I did my Project 100 uses update, I was filming on my bed on a pile of pillows and blankets. And so whenever I moved the whole camera. Hey, Chris. So my secondary goal with this palette was to see the difference between this palette, these shades, and this palette and these shades, and I actually found that pretty much none of them were particularly good dupes for each other, which is excellent for me, but also the shades in this swatched very differently than they look in the pans, which I think is why now that I have the Carnival 3 palette, I think is one of the reasons I haven't been using this as much, just because even though I've used this a lot more, I still kind of feel like I'm not really sure what the colors are going to turn out like. So I think, like to go back to using this palette a little bit more and getting better use out of the colors, especially with my new brushes. I find that the brush I had before was really soft and like luxurious feeling, but it did better at a wash of color as opposed to like a really bold color. They're like much more pigmented with the brushes I'm using. But I found, actually, I think this is going to surprise you. It surprised me. The only shade that's really similar is this shade Nemesis in the palette. This dark purple. I have it on my eyes right now. You can see it. It's the color that's all over my lids. And the shade that's similar to is actually the shade that I have buffed out Nemesis with, which is Tan Lines. So Tan Lines is this one, And so Tan Lines is similar in tone to Nemesis. So Tan Lines is actually quite pink. It looks more, I don't know, it didn't look pink in the palette to me, but when you put it on the eyes, it's actually quite pink. It's pinker than this, but it is the most similar, and everything else doesn't really have a good dupe or comparison at all to each of the palettes. They're quite different. And so today I have Nemesis and Tan Lines. So I have Nemesis all over my lid, and then Tan Lines buffing it out on the upper and lower. And then I put Starlight on the inside of my eyes, and that's all I have on my eyes right now. Oh, I also have Karma, the black from this palette, to deepen out the outer corner. So I managed to get both of my goals done. The only goal that I really want to achieve, I suppose, is now that I can use the shimmers in this palette, is using all of the shimmers that I haven't used so far. So I believe, excuse me while I look at this palette, I haven't used this month. Yes, Amethyst has yet to be used. Starlight I just used on my inner corner, but I'd like to use it in a way that maybe is more conducive. Starlight is very thick glitter chunks, which I should have guessed by the look of it. But I think it'd be better on my lid as opposed to I tried to put it in the inner part of my eye, and that did not work. So I need to use Amethyst. I've used Pink Rose twice. Blue Moon I haven't used yet. Pearl I have not used yet. I used JJ in a look pretty much exactly like this, but with JJ instead of Starlight. And I didn't use Tan Lines to buff it out, and it was a really pretty look to turn it a lot more purple than pink. I've used Rum, and I need to use Vanilla. So the only goal is to use each of those once and then just have a good play with my palette. Before I started my project, I used my Divina palette. So last year, before I started this project, I used my Divina palette 38 times. Last year, before I started this project, I used my Carnival 3 palette 7 times. So those were my starting numbers that are going to be included in my Project 100 uses from before the start of the year and before I started doing these updates. On my first update, I used my Divina palette an extra 4 times, and I used my Carnival 3 palette an extra 8 times, which takes my Divina palette up to 42 uses for last month, and my Carnival 3 palette total up to 15 uses for last month. This month, I have used my Divina palette 4 more times. So this month, I've used my Carnival 3 Love Tahini palette 10 times. So I upped that from 8 times last month. I'm gonna see next month if I end up, now that I'm not so hyper-focused on my Carnival 3 palette, seeing if the Divina palette gets a little more love. I think that will be really interesting. So this year, since the start of my project, there are 4 colors in my Divina palette that I actually haven't used yet. So it's this light green here I have not used yet this year. The dark green here I haven't used that yet this year. The red shimmer here I've not used yet this year. And this red I have also not used yet this year. So if we're going to talk about why those particular colors, I think it's because, as for the red, I honestly like the reds in my Carnival 3 palette a lot better. I find this doesn't turn out like the Carnival 3 palette. Let me open it up for you guys. But the Carnival 3 palette has 2 reds that I really like. There's Chili Peppers, which is my favorite red in the palette. It's a little darker, but it's very fire engine red, like just very red. And then you have Blaze, which is a little bit more pinky, but it's also quite a red, whereas the red in my Divina palette actually swatches out more just kind of bricky, which I don't, every time I hold these together, I have to, oh my god, I could have just been doing this the whole time. So as you can kind of see, the red in my Divina palette is a lot more brick red, which is not really my aesthetic. I like big, bold colors. So I'm gonna have to see, I think this month, what I can do about that, and if there's any ways that I can use the red in my Divina palette, that I wouldn't use the bright reds in that palette, perhaps as a way to darken out colors or make looks more grungy. Or maybe I'll work with the neutrals, but I'm gonna have to see what I can do about using that color more. And then the light green and the dark green, I just haven't been reaching for because I've been so focused on trying to use the greens in this palette. The last colors that I used were the greens. There was a purple look because there's so much purple out there, was just a lot to do. A neutral look and a green look that I had yet to do. So I think those are colors I just don't gravitate to as much. I used to wear a lot of green, especially like I have clothes in this exact color, but I haven't been wearing them as much. And I think that's also translating into the eyeshadow looks I've been doing. So I think it's just a matter of personal preference of I just haven't been using greens. And then the red shimmer is it's a very particular kind of, I'm gonna hold these down now, my arms hurt. The red shimmer is just a very particular look. It's something that I only really use every once in a while when I want something very like powerful and bright, and I don't incorporate it into everything. I've also found I really like all matte looks. I haven't been doing a lot of them because I've been testing out the shimmers, especially with my new glitter glue. But I do like all matte looks a lot, and the shimmers, Divina shimmers are really good. They're really nice, but they are intense, and I love that about them. But it also means that if I want something just more muted or like dark and grungy, I don't really feel like the shimmers are good for dark grungy looks, just because they're so bright. They bring so much life and energy into the look that they don't feel as gloomy and dark and devious as I'd like. And so I really need to be in a like very loud mood to use those shimmers. And so a red shimmer is just something that I'm not going to reach for as much, which is fine by me. So I think this month I'm also going to try and use the colors. Basically, I'm going to try using all the colors that I haven't used this year in this project. So before I started this project, I had 38 uses on my Divina palette. And since January, I have used the Divina palette 8 times, which means 38 plus 8 is 46. So I've used the Divina palette 46 times in total, so we're reaching about the halfway point with my Divina palette, which is excellent. The other thing about the Divina palette is, even though we're reaching halfway to 100 uses, which I feel like should feel like a lot, maybe it's not a lot of uses really, but it doesn't look, other than the black which shattered last month, that was exciting, and the light green, which is so powdery. It's unbelievably powdery. None of these shadows look particularly, they all look used. Like, you can tell they've been used. A lot of their markings are worn off of them. You know, they're used, but they don't really look that used. None of them are even remotely close to hitting a pan. None of them have significant dips for the most part, except for those 2 shadows that I've mentioned. They all look relatively untouched, which is impressive, but it also means this palette's going to last forever. And then for my Carnival 3 palette, I used it 7 times before this project started, and since this project has started, I've used it 18 times. So I've used the Carnival 3 palette since purchasing it 25 times already, which means I'm a quarter of the way to my 100 uses. And being a quarter way to my 100 uses, I still haven't used most of the shades repeatedly. There's a few shades that I've used a couple of times, and I'll go over those now. Hi, editing me here, so we're not doing that. I'm going to put up a picture here. Things with the number 3 have been used 3 times, 2 times, 1 time. and anything that doesn't have a number on it has not been used yet. So I'll give you a minute to look at that. Pause here. Great. Now that you've paused and looked at what you want to look at, we'll go back into our regularly scheduled program. So I think that's all the information I could ever possibly give. Editing me here again. I didn't put a place in to put all the eyeshadow looks I've been doing, so this will be our place. Here's some of the eyeshadow looks I've done. By some of, I mean all of the ones I've taken pictures of will be up here. I'll put some music behind it or something, I don't know. That look was pretty. I don't know, look, there's no look. Wasn't that look great? What a great look that was. Wow, I'm so talented. Okay. Hopefully that was enough time for a bunch of pictures of looks and... Okay. I'm gonna end the video now. I don't think I could give any more information if I tried. Those are all my numbers. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you next week. Also, what do you think of my new setup? I got the bookshelf. It's not in view as much as I thought it would be, but I'm still very happy that I have it. I will see you guys later. Bye.